Well, hi Elizabeth. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi,
Hi,
I'm
I'm
Elizabeth
Elizabeth
Mallory,
Mallory,
and
and
I
I
did the project
the project
Womantree for
Womantree
Burning
for
Man this
Burning
year.
Man this year. And Elizabeth, describe the project if you would, and I might be able to add pictures to it while you're describing it.
Um, Womantree is
Womantree is
a
a
16-foot tree
16-foot
that I
tree that I
built
built
that's
that's
made out of the
made out of
cast
the cast
figures of
figures
women.
of women.
So
So
there's about
there's
30
about
women
30
in it,
women in it,
and
and
they're all
they're all
basically
basically.
people. They're all basically realistic casts of people that are currently alive.
And what would you say is the meaning of the sculpture? Does it have a message or meaning?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Does the sculpture have a message or meaning?
Um, the sculpture, it means different people reacted to it differently. Some people saw it as Dante's Inferno. Other people saw it more along the lines of purgatory. Um, um, I saw the sculpture more along the lines of uh, it was like a totem pole. It's
Hmm.
about um, It's about the lives of, it's specifically about women, and it's about the lives of one person coming out of the life of another person, coming out of the life of another person in a totem pole fashion, and how everybody's lives are interwoven, or your life is interwoven from the life of your ancestor. Um, a friend of mine had once told me that we're all the sons of farmers, and which case it meant that we've all basically come from the same place, and our lives grow out in a fractal fashion, and we grow out from each other. And so the tree is about people growing and growing out from the lives of each other in a family
Interesting.
sense, in a
Yeah.
family sense or historical sense, both.
I'm sorry, what was
Um,
the last thing you said?
in a family sense and in a historical sense. So who
Uh-huh.
you are today has everything to do with the people that came before you and the people that came before them, and that in the whole picture of that creates a tree. Its own tree, its
Interesting.
own life.
Elizabeth, when you talk, it'd be better if you could kind of look up a little bit at where the little camera is at the top of the laptop. That way I'll see your eyes. Can you tell me some of the people that have influenced you or on below your totem pole?
You came in. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, well, you said it's kind of like a totem pole of people on top of each other, and it could be interpreted as on the shoulders of others, kind of responding to who came before them. And is there anybody in particular of who came before you personally that inspired it or inspired kind of that feeling?
My mother. Um, and I am the product of somebody who emigrated here from Jamaica, and um, she had no real knowledge or interest in art, and she was the product of. So she came here. She was came in here from the very very rural part of Jamaica, and then her parents are my grandparents, who I've never met, is a mixed couple, a black and white couple um, from the early part of the 1900s in Jamaica. And so, it's interesting to me to wonder what that all looked like. And then 3 generations later, the product of their lives and what they believed and what they hoped for and what they wanted their children to be ended up creating me, a Burning Man artist. I'm sure they never saw that, but the base of the tree doesn't really know what the stems of the tree are going to look like. But um, uh, a part of the way I think about things is integrated in how my mother thought about things, which is integrated into how they thought about things.
Is your mother still alive, and what's she doing?
My mother's still alive. My grandparents aren't.
Uh-huh. Are you close to her?
Well, yes, in some ways, and no in others. I I became something very different than what was real for her because she's very practical. She's very down to earth, and I'm not practical or down to earth really. And it
Hmm.
and you never know what your kids are going to become. Your kids can be just like you or very different, but your kids will always carry you inside of them, even if they grow up to become radically different individuals. You can still see the seed of who you are in them. And so I am the product of me, what I am. My mother is still in me, and my grandparents are still in me, and my great grandparents are in me. It's the same for me as it is all people. So we are all, um, we don't really go through life alone. We go through life with the lives of these other people still alive inside of us in some spiritual sense, either in a totem pole or in a rock formation or the formation of a tree or the growth of anything really. Everything comes out of something else. And so your forefathers never really died. The the seed of who and what they were is planted inside of you and can be seen inside of you as well. If I have kids, who I am will also be implanted in them, and and from a bird's eye view, so to speak, you see the the larger life form, which is the composite of all of these people and all of these beliefs and all and um, their understanding of what life is and what it means. And so that in itself becomes a tree, its own life force.
That's very cool. I like how both people are results of the people before them, and trees are, and people and trees. Um, and do you feel like your sculpture out there on the playa at Burning Man might influence people in subtle ways that they don't even know how it might?
I only heard part of what you said. My sculpture at Burning Man, and
And do you think it will possibly influence people in some ways?
oh, I know it has. It already has. I've heard um, I was surprised at the response. I was surprised at how there's something about it that really affects people, and maybe it has to do. I think it has to do. One of the reasons why I think it affects people is because it's so historically steeped. There's the archetype of the tree, and archetypes in the Jungian sense are something that all people understand. Um, there is the whole historical reference of the Italian sculptures, Renaissance sculptures, reliefs, and most people can identify with that image, which is a part of our ancient history. Um, and because the sculpture is made from the faces and the bodies of real people, not mannequins, not idealized people, but people that are real, I think on a human level it's the human element of looking into those faces and knowing that we are that, we've seen that, we've experienced that, we've seen that face before, we know that expression, and there's an elemental reaction to that.
Very cool. Any specific responses you noticed to people on the playa?
Um, People have said they think somebody looks scared or looks happy. Um, People have said that some of the figures look very spooky to them. I think the figures that are literally on, not on literally on the ground, but very close to the ground at the base of the tree, where their bodies are somewhat buried under the ground. Um, that reminds me of people who are in my life that I've seen who are disabled or are um, have some sort of retardation because it's hard for them to stand up. It's hard for them to get any sort of height. They, to me, they seem to have a lot more weight on their shoulders than the people perhaps higher up in the tree. I mean, I used to work with disabled people, and sometimes it's not a derogatory thing. It's just I see the struggles they have, and they bear a lot of invisible weight of just simply trying to survive. And so I saw, and so to me, the figures that are at the bottom remind me of people that have so much on top of them just to live at all, and they're closer to the root and closer to the earth. Their lives are much more based in just basically surviving and finding the water source. Whereas the people higher up in the tree are maybe not as worried about the water source and more interested in finding the sunlight. But it's all part of the same human tree.
That's fascinating with the water source and the sunlight. I think it's a great reminder to people, your sculpture, of how we're a result of the people that came before us, and then the people after us will be a result of us in various ways. Tell me about how you made it, and who were the people that you used to cast the sculptures?
I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
Well, tell me, how did you make the sculpture, and who were some of the people that you used as models?
Oh, the sculptures are all made from my friends, and um, you basically cover them with a product called alginate, which is a seaweed-based product, and it takes and it's like a big wetsuit that sticks to them, and when you peel it off, it has a perfect it molds them perfectly, so it has a perfect, a perfect negative of what they look like. Um, it's not always easy to work with it because then you have to peel it off and you have to make a harder outer shell, and the whole thing has to come together correctly. It's a real craft to do it well. Um, but theoretically, if you do everything right, you can make an exact duplicate of the person, or pretty close to exact, because the alginate product it's able to capture it captures the pores, it captures the wrinkles, it even captures the hair, but the hair doesn't pull out of it. It usually captures the hair and pulls the hair out. So that's why people have to shave when they do this. Or if you
Oh, really? They can't have any hair on them when they do it?
they can, but then there'll be a really horrible Chinese waxing. Just
Did,
pull the
did
hair
your
out.
female friends did your female friends have to shave their head, or did they have something they wore on their head?
Pardon me?
Oh, so did your friends have to shave their heads when they did it, or did they wear something on their
Oh
heads?
no, all the figures, if you notice, they all have shrouds over their head because none of them have any hair.
Oh, right.
Except there's one lady who has hair and she has bangs, and I covered her bangs in Vaseline, and that's the only way it pulled out, and still was all gloppy. But yeah, they all shave. Well, girls don't have that much hair anyway, and they're not as connected to it anyhow. So I told them all to shave their body hair. They didn't have much to shave anyway, and then it all came off very quickly because girls just aren't hairy. And I didn't. And a couple of them shaved their pubic hair a little bit, but they're not that hairy to start with, and some of them wore panties, so it wasn't as traumatic. And then, you see, if I did a tree made out of all men, it would have been a big trauma thing, because men are so hairy.
Did you know ahead of time how the different bodies would fit together, or did that come about after you sculpted them?
Oh, I had no idea how they fit together. You know,
So,
I didn't really preconceive it. I had some idea because I had done a project similar to it last year. So I had a rough idea of how I wanted it to go. But um, part of the fascinating thing for me is how, when you get the whole thing, how, when you put the whole thing together, how relationships between the people on the tree sort of form organically just by proxy. Like you'll have one woman's face who's right up into another woman's face, or you'll have someone else's face that's just nestled under somebody's arm. I did create people that were two-headed and three-headed. If you really look at them, if you really, really look at them, some of them had 2 and 3 heads on them. And I learned from last year that created the it forced the relationship because people's heads would be so close together. They didn't look like three-headed people because of the shrouds on their heads, but it forced people's heads to be very, very close together, and so it looked like people were either looking very closely at each other or people were laying next to each other. Some people there are some parts of the tree where it looked like there was a mother-daughter thing, where there's somebody's head who was much larger than the other, and the way their heads were positioned together, it kind of gave the illusion that there was a more intimate relationship between the two people. So, so I did force it a little bit like that. The arms there was way more arms than there were people. So if you counted the bodies, there was not one body to one head. There may have been 10 bodies, 20 heads, and and 60 arms. So
really?
it didn't really march out. And then there were several legs in there that were completely disembodied, that had no body associated with them at all. And so your mind fills in the rest as to why legs appear out of nowhere. And of course there was umpteen million fingers because the fingers kept breaking. So I just put them wherever. I put them in the roots of the trees, but I did with them actually.
You said before that the experience of seeing your sculpture at night is different than daytime. Can you talk about that?
You said before that what?
The experience of seeing your sculpture at nighttime is
Oh,
different than seeing it at daytime. What's the
yeah.
difference?
In the daytime, I thought in the daytime it was very bright. I thought it was very bright and very well delineated. I could see the mistakes during the daytime. And in the morning, the sculpture would look different because of the sunrise, and the sun would cast a sort of a pink light on it, and so it gave it more of a it gave it a kind of a glow that you'd only see in the daytime. Plus, it was naturally patinaed by the dirt. So, and this I knew ahead of time. If the dirt, the dust from the playa blows on the piece, it gets into the cracks and crevices of it, and you see the details more clearly. You see the wrinkles more clearly. You see all of those things that compose a face more clearly, and it also stains it. So you would see people's faces would be stained as if they were weathered and they had gone through something or they had been in the dirt or whatever. And then at night, um, you lost the detail and the light shone on it and it made the whole thing brighter against the darkness. And so it became more of one unified white piece, which made it more haunting. And it was bottom lit. So bottom lit meaning like stage lighting, where people's faces are illuminated from the bottom, and so that also made it a stage effect of making things more monsterly, like darker, scarier. All those things, all those horror movies, they all do the same thing. They light things from the bottom, and then the figures would disappear as into the darkness of the night as you looked up. They would just naturally recede in the darkness. And I also have pictures of it when it was really interesting at Burning Man because there's all those lights in the back. You'd have the laser lights, or you'd have lights from fires, or lights from whatever was going on, and so you had this very interesting ambient light behind it, which gave it the effect of thunder or some other unearthly thing that was happening behind it. So it most people thought it looked much scarier at night during the daytime. But I also saw the strongest reactions to it at night rather than the daytime. And the nighttime also erased the mistakes. And so it looked more together.
Well, very interesting, Elizabeth. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that before we finish this interview?
Um, um, it's the first quiet piece I've ever done. I was very pleased at how it turned out. The piece, I think, became much more than what I conceived of it to be.
How so?
I mean, I didn't see all the relationships that were going to happen in the piece. I didn't see how dramatic it was going to become, you know, in the daytime versus the nighttime. I didn't even, I couldn't even predict how the quote human element of it would play out and how much people reacted to seeing effigies of themselves encapsulated in a tree. I didn't predict how dramatic that would be. And I also didn't predict how trapped these people all looked, so trapped in the tree. And that in itself was very dramatic. People have an idea about freedom. I mean, we all want to be free, but we're still trapped in our life force. We're still trapped in that tree fractal that we're part of.
Well, very good. Well, it's fascinating. I love your sculpture, and it's interesting to hear what you have to say about it.
Uh-huh.
So, thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we can chat just a bit afterwards, still on the on our earbud. So, see you later.
All right. Bye.